Peace, peace, family. How's everyone out there? How's everyone out there? Welcome to another episode on Black Magic 363. We got a great show tonight. This is a special show because we are talking about the topic of trauma is a very popular one. And with all this talk of ascension in the spiritual community, trauma is a big thing that we need to address if we want to get to the next stage of where we're supposed to be at if we're going into the age of Aquarius. I want to welcome back to the show. I forgot I was watching a Bruce Lipton video and somebody recommended my guest to me. I forget, it might have been KT the Arch Degree or Blue Pill, one of them. But this guest, she's been on here once before, has one of the most incredible Instagram pages. If you want to learn about quantum biology and just the quantum world in general, I want to welcome back to the show, Dr. Catherine Clinton. Welcome back, Catherine.
Thank you so much for having me on. I'm really excited to dive into this.
Yeah, I learned so much from your Instagram, so I'm glad that you're doing what you do on Instagram. Definitely keep it up.
Well, thank you. I love sharing this information. I love getting messages back saying, this helped me. Just Instagram, just free information for people to feel better, to have a better life. And that's what we should be doing, right? As a collective, we should be raising each other up.
Indeed. So with this thing with trauma, real important topic. I mean, super important topic when we talk about trauma. You kind of offer a different approach to trauma, a more quantum approach to trauma. And I know people are very open to hearing different approaches. I know a lot of people who just can't seem to get over certain traumas that they have experienced in their life. So I know you got a workshop and we're going to get into that later. But when you say the quantum biology of trauma, what exactly do you mean by that?
Well, when we're talking about quantum biology, we're talking about a different view of how the body works. We're used to talking about a chemical, mechanical view of the body. So you take a supplement or you take a pharmaceutical, there's chemical diffusion that happens where the chemical needs to go throughout the body to do what it needs to do. Or a mechanical aspect, you've got a receptor and a protein that come together, lock and key, unlock for action to happen. But there's another way to view the body where the body is working with resonance. It's working with frequency, like two tuning forks where you strike one and the other one starts to sing that same tune. There seems to be something happening, that same mechanism of action with frequency, with resonance, with vibration in the human body. And that's where quantum biology comes in. It looks at the flow of electrons, protons, photons of light, vibrations of sound, how all these kind of work on the backdrop of this specialized, easy, structured water in the body, and how we can affect these things for biological health, for unraveling trauma, for so many different ways to affect our health and longevity.
Let me ask you this, Catherine. Biologically speaking, if that's the correct term to use, why does early life trauma seem so much more difficult to get rid of than maybe trauma that happens in your later years in your life?
That's a great question. I think we're working with a couple different things there. We're working with the foundation of a human being. We're working with these early pathways. We're working with a human that's just being formed. And so many of us receive this subconscious train of thought from someone of authority. And oftentimes that subconscious train of thought is not necessarily positive, and it's working against our health. And, you've got that aspect that this person is just being formed. And on top of that, what you see with the connections of trauma and how the body works is these pathways, if they're not addressed, they can last a lifetime. So when somebody has childhood trauma, we see a derangement of the gut microbiome, a shift to microbial composition in the gut that's more harmful. And I do little air quotes there because I think the microbiome is acting accordingly. I think it's trying to help us, but it's dealing with this danger signal. We see the same thing in the immune system, this derangement of the immune system, this hyperreactivity, this increase in inflammation. And again, I don't think it's our body going haywire. I think it's our body reacting to a danger signal. But if there's not a stop to that, if it's not addressed, we see increased inflammation, we see skewed inflammatory and immune responses, we see gut health issues that impact our neurological function, our mood, our thought processes. And so if that gets laid down in early childhood, then by the time we're an adult trying to address this, this is a well-worn path in our biology. And it's not that we can address it. We absolutely can, but it's just a groove, a well-worn groove in our neurological circuits.
Have you ever looked into, I've heard people talk about this before, so I'm glad to hear I can ask you this. The way we are brought into this world, they say it's a very traumatic experience and it lingers on for the rest of our life. So let me give you an example. We're brought into this world. We're in darkness for 9 months or whatever. As soon as we come to this world, a bright light. I mean, extremely bright light. The people loud. They say they. I don't know if they still smack the babies. Like they said, they want the baby to cry. Just so much going on when you're born to this world. Some of the babies don't even come out the canal no more. The vaginal canal. They are C-section babies. So it's a very traumatic experience for a lot of souls entering this world. Do you think that's something that a lot of people don't consider? Do you think that impacts us later on in life and how we respond and how we react to trauma?
Yeah, that's a great point. It absolutely can. And I think when we look at ancient indigenous cultures, the way that midwives worked was quite the opposite of what you're describing here, right? We are in the dark. We are birthing with a group of women and helpers, and this idea of the bright light and the forceps pulling babies out, immediately circumcising, cutting that umbilical cord, all of those things, step after step after step, absolutely constitute a trauma that, like you said, a lot of people aren't recognizing.
Yeah, they even like take the baby away from the mother like immediately. Like there's just a lot of things going on so that poor little baby is like, what is going on?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
remember the last time me and my lady gave birth, like we had a list of, our doula told us to give the hospital a list of things we wanted them to do. So we talked about, we had meditation music, we wanted the lights dim, we had a mirror, we had like a lot of different things that we implemented. So I think doulas are extremely important. I think that everybody should look into that at least, just research it at least.
Oh, absolutely. I don't know if you know this about me, but that's how I got started in natural health. I assisted with a midwife for 7 years, 6,
I
7 years.
knew that.
And I realized like I can't be a midwife. Those people are incredible, but I have to go to sleep at night.
Yeah.
They're incredible. But it is doing what you did, having that support and having that sovereignty to be like, this
Yeah.
is what I need. This is what my family needs to have a healthy birth and to welcome this precious new life. That's incredible.
Have you ever found any connection between trauma that's in the body? And we're going to talk about the fascia. I love the work and how you talk about the fascia. I learned so much about that. We're going to deal with that. But the trauma that's stored in the body, and maybe somebody who suffers from drug addiction. And the reason why I asked that, like there's a lot of people that like, I'll give you an example. There's a saying that there's a drug that infiltrated the black community, crack. And in the community, people usually say, man, once a crackhead, always a crackhead, because it's so hard to get over that addiction of crack. So is there any the way it hits the cells, what happens in the body, is there any type of connection going on when somebody's addicted to drugs and when trauma's in the body?
I think that there's a clear association between trauma and, like we were talking about, this subconscious train of thought where we're not enough. We're trying to fill a void. We're trying to ease the pain, and drug addiction. Absolutely. I think we can say that clearly, that that plays a role in that, a major role. And that's part of the problem with what we see with drug programs and how we treat people on drugs, and the whole legal system, and the police state. All of those things don't do anything to help that, to address that. They just further that, right? And so of course that's going to be hard for somebody to overcome that addiction if they're just being further traumatized by what's
Mhm.
being happening to them around them.
Indeed, indeed. I want to read one of your posts. I think this is very important, and a lot of people who consider themselves spiritual could learn from this post and what your response may be to my question. You say our heart, and people have heard this before from the Heart Math Institute. Our heart has a magnetic field 100 times larger than the brain and creates the largest electromagnetic field in the human body. The magnetic field of the heart is affected by emotion and can communicate with those around us by something termed cardio electromagnetic communication. Very important, Catherine. So, with that being said, a lot of people in the spiritual community consider themselves empaths.
Mhm,
They
mhm,
feel as though they could feel emotion. They could feel people's emotion.
mhm,
And what I want to ask is, if a person is an empath, or a person, let's just say a person has a good heart and they feel bad about doing the slightest thing, or a person could feel pain. So their family, they may have a certain, their family may not be good people, and it really bothers them more than the average person. What
mhm.
advice? Because it almost seems like their body's punishing them more than the average person. So and that's crazy. Like, so you mean the better human I am, the more my body's going to punish me? So what advice would you have to somebody who's extremely sensitive
Mhm.
to the external environment? How can they protect themselves so they won't take on the trauma imposed on them by the external environment?
Well, that's a great question, because there's truth to that, right? And empaths out there know that. They feel this. They
Yeah.
feel how affected they are by the actions of others. And it has nothing to do with them. This is an outside factor.
Mm-hmm.
And what we're talking about, that post that you brought up, this cardio electromagnetic field, this communication that happens, the heart has the biggest electromagnetic field in the body. It extends out 6 or more feet. It actually can entrain the electromagnetic field of the brain and create a state of heart coherence. And so it's kind of a double edged sword being an empath. Yes, we do feel those emotions more, but we also have the power to create this state of coherence within us that is resilient, that is strong, and that has the power to entrain other people's state of coherence, and regulate their nervous system. There's research out there. You mentioned Heart Math Institute. They've done an incredible job pioneering this field, and they found that if a person is strong in their own heart coherence, they have the ability to entrain, to sync up people's nervous system, their heart coherence, their state of regulation, just with their own state. So, people out there who are experiencing the emotional tug of being pulled into somebody's lack of coherence, or whatever that emotion is that is affecting them greatly, they can sink back into their own state of coherence. They can use that to regulate themselves. They can even use that to regulate the people around them that are bothering their own state
Interesting.
of
That's
being.
interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah. Now that word coherence, I hear you in what's his name? Is it Bruce? Bruce or Greg Braden? Y'all mention heart brain coherence a lot. Joe Dispenza mentions it too. What's the biggest thing preventing heart brain coherence? And before you answer that, could you just tell people what exactly is heart brain coherence?
sure. Well, we just talked a little bit about it. This magnetic field of the heart can entrain our brain. And so when we're talking about coherence, that's the idea of two or more things acting as one. two
Yeah.
people dancing the tango, multiple molecules of water acting as a wave across the ocean, right? It's when multiple things work together for one common action. And the body has its own sense of coherence. And that starts in the heart and it entrains the brain, and that acts as a ripple throughout our biology. It decreases our inflammation, it regulates our immune system, it impacts our cardiovascular system, our respiratory system. It just, like a ripple, goes throughout the body and causes regulation and balance. And this heart brain coherence starts with a sense of gratitude or a sense of
Mhm.
love or a sense of awe, right? Some people who are really sick or going through something really traumatic, it's hard for them to find gratitude somewhere because
Mhm.
there's so many bad things happening. But sometimes there's still a sense of awe at something beautiful in the world or something they find beautiful that they can think about and have this feeling. So basically, what you do is you slow your breath, you
Mhm.
drop your attention into the center of your chest where your heart is. You can even place your hand there.
Mhm.
You lower your breath, you focus on that heart center, and then you focus on actually feeling that feeling of gratitude, that feeling of joy. And I'm going to be honest with you. This is where I kind of differ from Braden and Bruce Lipton, Joe Dispenza,
Mhm.
because absolutely love, gratitude, awe, that's going to cause coherence in the body. But at the same time, we're human and we get angry, we get sad, we feel rage, and it's righteous sometimes, right? And
Mhm.
the idea that those human emotions can degrade coherence or kick us out of a coherent state, I think a little bit differently about it. I think that when we get in an angry state and we judge it or we turn it on somebody else, blame somebody else about it, we feel sadness, we repress it, any of these negative emotions, if we don't feel them fully, then yeah, we're not in coherence. We're not dancing the tango with that emotion, right? We're trying to stuff it somewhere or turn it on somebody else. But we as humans are meant to feel all of those emotions. And in my clinic, I hook people up to a heart rate variability machine that measures heart coherence, and we're using EKG leads. So we've got three
Oh,
sensors that we put on the chest like an
yeah.
EKG.
Yeah.
And I've seen people suffering from trauma, immediate loss of a partner, loved one, where they're feeling angry at the loss, where they're feeling extreme sadness, and their heart coherence is off the chart. And I think the reason for that is because they're feeling it, they're going through it, and they're not causing this friction. They're not trying to blame somebody or stuff it down, repress it, judge it, because I think we've all had that experience of being angry and doing what you need to do. And then on the other side of anger is peace. On the other side of sadness is a deep love, you know? So I differ a little bit with some of the traditional definitions of how it just has to be love and light to be
Mhm.
in a state of coherence. I think we can be in a state of coherence if we're being coherent with what we're really feeling and not trying to turn it on somebody or stuff it or repress it. So that's heart coherence in a nutshell, is this idea that with our emotions and being true to ourselves, we can create a resonance, a coherent state in the body. It's like the body is a symphony and all the instruments, all the organs are an instrument playing the same song. That would be coherence.
That's deep. I love how you put that. I'm gonna take that clip and I'm gonna put it on Instagram. That was dope. That was dope. Wow. So I mean, is that what you would call being authentic? Is
Yeah.
that you would say that's being authentic?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
you know what's interesting about that, Catherine? When people are going through sadness or heartache or whatever, sometimes that's when some of the most beautiful art gets created.
Yeah.
So, like artists or musicians or painters or
Yeah.
architecture, like some people build magnificent things
Yeah.
sometimes when they're going through it, and they don't like try to hide it. They just kind of like, take it out on the pen and paper or art or whatever they're good at. So it's like very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say that's definitely being authentic. And I just think it's just common sense. Like we're humans.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we've all had experiences where we're angry, and rightfully so. And to be like, I'm not going to feel that anger because I need to always be in a state of love and gratitude is a misnomer. I don't think it's supposed to work that way. We're supposed to feel sadness. We're supposed to feel anger. We're supposed to feel those things. I think getting stuck in them, repressing them, turning them on somebody else isn't that authenticity, right? It's just walking with that emotion and letting it flow. And then we get to those emotions that are so commonly talked about in heart coherence: joy, gratitude, peace, contentment.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you this, Catherine. Let me ask you this. So, something you said very interesting. I heard people say before, if our body, if the inner workings of our body, let's say it's a symphony, what instrument would you describe the fascia as? It's like this
Mm.
a web. What instrument would be the heart? What instrument, I guess, the kidneys, or just if you could think of certain organs, what instrument do you think does that organ remind you of, or that body function remind you of the most? It could be the ears. I know they call the ears the eardrum. So I mean, but like, give me the heart. Like, just start out with the heart. What would the heart be to you? What instrument?
That's a great question. And it's tempting to say that the heart, it has that beat, it has that low beat, but I also think of it as the conductor, right? It is the one in training that sense of coherence. And so I think of the heart sort of as the conductor. I think of the fascia as the bass, really.
Yeah.
That bass that going throughout the entire body, that low level conduction of sound and information. Maybe our brain and our thoughts would be more like the treble. Sometimes you just want to like turn that down a little bit.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. We get somewhere now. We get somewhere now. Wow. Wow. Oh man, wow, yeah, that's very, because we even the name of our body part, the organs, that's an instrument within itself, the organs, you know what I'm
Yeah,
saying? So
yeah,
it's like, wow, like we really are music inside.
yeah,
Let me ask you this, because what one thing I like to do, I always like to do when we talk about topics such as quantum physics, or metaphysics, or spirituality, sometimes people could get a little lost in the terminology. So I like to use references from pop culture to kind of make it more relatable. So
yeah.
there's a popular song. I don't know if it hit number one on the billboards. Her name is you can tell me the shit. Dochi, right? I think her name is Dochi. It's a black female. Her name is Dochi, and she has a song. Her most popular song is called Anxiety. And people, she's like, it's my anxiety. And she's just talking about how her anxiety is being triggered. It's catchy. I ain't going front. It's catchy. I don't listen to it because I don't want to, program my mind with that. But it's real catchy though. What I want to ask you is, because our body is music, a symphony, and we're listening to music. If we listen to music, let's say promoting anxiety, but at that same time, the emotions in our body, we're like smiling and dancing at the same time. What kind of message does that send to the body? Because people are dancing to the song, they're having a good time, but it's negative lyrics. It's talking about how she's embracing, almost like embracing anxiety. So it almost seems like it's sending a mixed message to the body. How do you think your body will react to something like that?
That's a great question. And I think that there's a couple things at play, that words do have power. Just like
Yeah.
you said, I don't want to listen to that. I don't want to train my body, you know. And I think there's absolutely something to that. And I also think that the catchiness of it, and going back to that beat and that bass, that's good medicine. So if we can find music
Mhm.
that is conscious and catchy at the same time, I mean, that's really ideal. That's what we're looking for, because that gives us that low frequency beat. There's research out there. John Stewart Reed has done incredible research showing that that low frequency that's in popular music, that
Mhm.
bass,
Mhm.
it goes in, and he took donated blood from a blood bank,
Mhm.
and he looked at the red blood cells that carry oxygen throughout the body, and he looked at the white blood cells, the immune system cells. And he found that these low frequency beats cause the cells to live longer. So when you get blood from a donation bank, you've got a percentage of cells that are alive and healthy. Then you have
Mm,
another percentage of cells that are damaged and on their way to dying. And then you have another percentage of blood cells that are dead and
mm,
dying.
mm.
And he found that those low frequency sounds actually help repair that middle category that are dysfunctional,
Oh,
damaged, on their way to dying. That low frequency sound helped repair them. And not only that, it increased how much oxygen those red blood cells could bind and take throughout the body. And then when you put that together with how we as humans have always gravitated towards low frequency sounds, towards drumming,
yeah.
towards chanting, it's just incredible to think about the power that music has. So I agree with you. Words have power. So if we can find conscious music with a good beat that we like to get down to, then that's some good medicine right there.
That's incredible research about the low frequency sounds, because
Yeah,
sometimes just because of the low frequency, people say, oh, that's not good because it's low, the bass is not good, or this isn't good.
yeah.
So that's very interesting, that study that was conducted. I'm definitely going to look more into that.
Yeah, it is really interesting. He's from England,
Mm,
and he did this research with a professor from Rutgers, uh,
mm,
Professor Sunjul G, and both of them thought, okay, it's going to be classical music that has the best
mm.
impact on these cells, and that's not what they found at all.
Ooh, that is some interesting stuff right there. Because
Yeah,
classical music has such an amazing reputation as being the best music to listen
yeah,
to raise your frequency, and you're saying the opposite. You're
yeah,
like the drums and the bass, like damn, whoa, yo, y'all hear this? This is the opposite of what they told us, because they told us classical and all that stuff. Okay, okay, we all right. I like this. I like that. You know,
yeah.
you mentioned. I want to ask this before I forget, Catherine. You mentioned oxygen a few times. There's something I see on your Instagram. Um, it's like new research, I guess you could say, from some guy. I forgot his name. He said that the air that we breathe is not the oxygen that our cells use; it's the electrons within the oxygen.
Yeah.
Could you elaborate on, because could you elaborate on that a little bit, please?
Yeah, yeah. His name is Professor Gerald Pollack, and he's from the University of Washington. And he's actually the one that has done all the research with this different phase of water in the body.
Right.
And he recently, I think it was last August, maybe July, he was looking at how we breathe oxygen in. And he was proposing that for many different reasons, the size of the capillaries, the size of where the oxygen needs to get to go through the lung tissue, he was suggesting that our oxygen is very negatively charged. It has a high negative electrical potential. It is covered with electrons. And he was proposing that we're not only breathing oxygen because of its oxygen capacities, right, to do what we know it to do in the body, but we're breathing oxygen because it's carrying electrons. And the interesting thing is, this is coming out of a whole tradition of researchers and scientists that are talking about the body as a bioelectric being, as an electric being. And this goes back over a century. We've got researchers like Albert St. Georgi and Robert Becker, and even now, Michael Levin. He is an incredible researcher, researching and publishing 30, 40 papers each year. And what they're finding is that our cells run on a negative electrical charge.
Mm,
And when we see a decrease in that negative electrical charge, we see things like immune disorders. We
mm,
see, he's done incredible research, Levin has, where you decrease the negative electrical charge of a cell and it starts replicating like a cancerous cell would. And then if you reestablish that negative electrical charge, it stops, it goes away. And it's incredible to think about the body, again, not only as this chemical mechanical being, but as a being that runs on frequency, runs on electricity and charge.
no, indeed, indeed. Wow. In terms of how we breathe, what would you recommend in terms of like breathing techniques to help with trauma? Is there any specific one you could recommend to help with trauma?
Well, first I'll just say that it's individual, right? And so finding something that works for you is absolutely going to be the best technique out
Mm,
there.
mm,
That said, my favorite is resonance breathing, and that's the breathing that they utilize with heart coherence exercises. And
mm,
it's about 6 breaths a minute. You slow
mm,
your breath down, but it's not uncomfortable. And
mm,
what's interesting is when you're breathing at that frequency, uh, it matches the geomagnetic frequency of the earth,
ooh,
which also matches what's called the Meyer flow of blood, the vortexing flow of blood through our vessels. And when you get all three of those matched up, there is a deep quieting of the nervous system. There is a deep regulating of the nervous system. And that can be really powerful for anybody who's experiencing or has experienced trauma or chronic stress. So that's one of my favorites, but everybody's so different. And there's so many different techniques out there, the lion's breath, box breathing, just creating an exhale that's longer than your inhale can really help calm the nervous system.
What can you tell us? Please tell us what is, I don't think you gave us a definition earlier, fascia. For those
Mhm.
who are new to this term, what exactly, because you talk a lot about fascia, what exactly is fascia in the human body?
Great question.
Mm,
It's really underappreciated. Fascia is this connective tissue network throughout the body. It connects every single cell and structure in the body. It can go into our cells, it connects all of our organs. This is something that, like that white thin layer that people remove when they're cooking a chicken breast. When I was in naturopathic
oh,
medical school, it was that covering that we would remove so we could get at the real organ.
so this?
Yeah,
Okay, okay.
yeah, yeah, exactly. It's this web of connective tissue, and connective tissue is mostly collagen. And so we have this collagen highway network throughout our body. And what's interesting is collagen is a semiconductor. And we were just talking about how the body is also bioelectric. It
Mm,
communicates, it transfers energy, it transfers information via one way is this collagen network, our fascial network. It's absolutely incredible. And on top of that, we were just talking about breathing in oxygen being high in electrons and the work of Gerald Pollack. He also was the one to show us that fascia, connective tissue, collagen is completely covered in this different structure of water. So as water comes up to a water loving surface like fascia, it takes on a different structure
mm,
and it is negatively charged, just like we were talking about how important negative charge is in the body. And as this water builds against our fascia, it kicks out a positively charged hydrogen or proton. And it is creating this separation of charge between the negatively charged water right up against the fascia and the positively charged water, a separation of charge just like we would see in a 9-volt battery. And it creates potential energy. In the laboratory, Pollock put an electrode in the negatively charged water and one in the positively charged water, and it was enough to light an LED light bulb. And we see not only is it creating this water battery, but it also creates this sea of free electrons. And there's a way to look at the body where pain, inflammation, trauma are all a deficiency in electrons, a deficiency in electrical charge. And so when we're talking about the fascia, we have this potential highway of collagen covered in water that can transfer energy via these free electrons like an electrical circuit, donating it where needed in the body, where there's a deficiency of electrical charge. So it starts to get really fascinating.
very fascinating. So, with that being said, because this is some fascinating stuff, let me show this now. Now, to the left is the fascia, to the right, is the universe, is what they
Mm,
would call the cosmic web. They look very similar. Cosmic filaments or the cosmic web. They scientists thought it was just empty space, but as technology got better, they detected the string like web like material all throughout space. So they're like, oh, this isn't empty space. This is like filled with this stuff right here. So if the collagen, if the fascia does that to our body, and we got something that looks so similar in the cosmos, what does that tell you about who we are, Catherine?
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You're getting right down to it. And that's what's so fascinating about what's coming out with this idea of how, oh, it's empty space. No, it's not empty. It's filled with this energy. Plasma researchers who have been researching the Kordylewski clouds or the Van Allen belts, plasma is this charged gas. And that water we were just talking about, that water that's all over our fascia, it's also called a plasma water, right? It's
Mm,
this fourth phase of water. And so now we have researchers talking about how this specialized water is running through our neurons, running through our microtubules, and researchers talking about how consciousness is not a product of what our neurons are doing. In fact, our neurons seem to be possibly acting as antennas to receive this cosmic information of a unified field, a universal intelligence, a 0 point field, an Akashic field. I mean, whatever you want to call it,
mm,
that we aren't just matter and machines going through day to day life. We are
mm,
receivers for this cosmic intelligence. We are embedded in this web of energy, this web of intelligence, and fascia, this liquid crystalline fascial antenna, plays
mm.
a huge piece in that. It's I think so hopeful that people are talking about our true role as humans and what it means to be conscious and what it means to have a field out there that we know exists, but we can't define it. And will we ever be able to? I don't know. But this idea that there's something more and taking that into account in our everyday lives can be really powerful, I think.
What would all right? So we talked about the fourth phase of water, and we talked about childbirth a little earlier.
Mhm.
Would you consider breast milk to be this fourth phase of water?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Breast milk is filled with proteins, and those are hydrophilic surfaces. And that has the potential to create this fourth phase of water. It's interesting to note that as the baby is developing in utero, in
Mm,
that amniotic fluid of the mother,
mm,
the neural tube that goes on to be the spinal cord and the spinal cord going into the cerebral spinal fluid and the flow up into the ventricles by the pineal gland and this flow of cerebral spinal fluid, that fluid
mm,
comes from the neural tube folding in and capturing some of that amniotic fluid.
mm,
So this isn't often talked about, but our
mm,
cerebral spinal fluid comes from our mother's amniotic fluid,
mm.
which comes from their mother's amniotic fluid. We have this lineage linking us throughout the uh, generations with our mothers and their amniotic fluid. It's just absolutely incredible.
That's fascinating. That is some fascinating stuff right there. Wow, I did not know that. I did not know that. So let me ask you. If let's use an analogy, Catherine. People refer to the body as I think you could say a liquid crystal body or a liquid crystal fascia or something to that extent. And we have in our technology, we have something called we have TVs that are called liquid crystal displays, LCDs. So we have two technologies that have the word liquid crystal in it, the avatar and the television set. If you, how would you just, what would, if a TV could hold trauma, what would you describe that like? So maybe we could get a better understanding of what we're doing to our body, and you explaining what the TV does when it's holding trauma.
Yeah, yeah, great analogy. So the reason we're able to talk here and see each other is because of that liquid
Yeah.
crystal uh, layering on our screens. And
Mm,
what a liquid crystal means is that all the molecules are oriented in a orderly fashion. And when there's an electrical signal, they move in a different orientation, let in a different amount of light,
mm,
creating these beautiful pictures, right?
mm, mm,
And so that's what our screens are doing. And when you look at the manufacturing of liquid crystal technology, these manufacturing plants go to extreme lengths to make sure that there are not pollutants and contaminants in this liquid crystal technology. And the reason for that is because any pollutants, any contaminants are going to interfere with that signaling where the electrical current comes in and causes that liquid crystal to change orientation. We could make the same analogy with our fascia and with trauma, with pollutants in our environment acting as obstacles to this flow of information and energy in the body, that flow of electrons that we were just talking about before. If there is an obstacle, a physical one, a scar, a trauma from surgery, from a fall, from an injury, or if there is an obstacle from pollutants, or if there's an obstacle from trauma, mental, emotional trauma, the guarding that happens in the fascia from traumatic events, all of these can act as obstacles to this flow of energy and information in the body that we want, just like manufacturers of
yep.
liquid crystal technology and our screens want.
Yep. Loved how you explained that. Definitely. What something else I see you mention a lot on your Instagram. You deal a lot with melanin, and I want to
Mhm.
ask you, what is the connection between melanin and the fascia?
Oh, that's a great question, because what we're talking about overall is this idea of the body and its ability to flow, transfer
Mm-hmm.
energy and information. And when we look at melanin, we were talking about fascia and collagen being a semiconductor. Melanin is also a semiconductor. And when we're talking about melanin, there's this relationship with our mitochondria. And our mitochondria are those little organelles in our cells that
Mm,
create ATP and energy.
right.
They also create other things, but for right now, we're talking electricity and energy, right? And
Mm,
so our melanin and our mitochondria actually talk. They have a relationship with each other. And melanin, we're so used to thinking of creates the color of our skin, our hair, our eyes, but we have melanin all throughout our body. We have melanin in our brain, neuromelanin. We
mhm.
have melanin in our internal organs. Our microbiome, those microbes are filled with melanin.
Mm,
And melanin is a semiconductor and it's a transducer. So it can take electricity and turn that into heat, into sound. It can take sound and heat and turn that into electricity. So we see this capacity of melanin to act in the body, in this bioelectric view of the body, as not only a semiconductor able to transfer energy, but it can transform energies into different energies.
mm,
And then if you add on top of that, that we talked about collagen being surrounded by this easy structured water, by this fourth phase of water, melanin is also covered in this
mm,
fourth phase water. And when we're exposed to light, researchers have found that this water surrounding melanin, when exposed to ultraviolet light, it splits into molecular hydrogen and molecular oxygen.
mm.
And molecular hydrogen is something that's kind of trendy right now.
Yeah, the
People
hydrogen
are,
water, right?
what'd you say?
The hydrogen water.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, hydrogen water. People are using hydrogen gas. We have countries like Japan. If you go in with cardiac arrest, they will put you on hydrogen gas because it helps you recover more quickly. And why is that? They seem to think that hydrogen goes into the mitochondria to make energy. And so it's great. It's a great supplement intervention, but we have that capacity. We seem to have that capacity via melanin to a certain extent, covered in this water, exposed to ultraviolet light, creating molecular hydrogen, molecular oxygen, which both can go into the mitochondria to create energy. So melanin is working in many different ways to transfer, create, transform energy, electricity in the body.
In terms of mental health, the majority of serotonin is in the gut, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
So serotonin is the chemical that makes us feel good. Should I say
Yep.
that? So if serotonin is in the gut, it helps us feel good, and the microbiome in the gut has melanin in it. How important is it for us to get sunlight in our gut, on our stomach area? Like, is that more, like, I'm trying to figure out, is that more important than other areas, since for our mental health, since the majority of our serotonin is in that area?
Yep, you're connecting the dots. Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's what they've shown. They've shown that, the fancy word photobiomodulation, basically light on the abdomen, is really important for gut health, for microbiome health. And we know how important that is for mental health. There's
Mhm.
just that direct communication between the gut and the brain. Our neurotransmitters, our mood, our anxiety, depression, all of these things are so intimately connected. So, absolutely, it is important to get light. And they've done research with all kinds of different light, red light devices, infrared light, natural light. And this light penetrates and can affect the composition of the microbiome. It's incredible.
Mm. Yeah, this is good stuff. I'm make sure all of y'all make sure y'all follow Dr. Catherine Clinton's Instagram. Um, a lot of the questions that I came up with today is inspired by her Instagram. Amazing, amazing information. Like I said, I don't know if it was either Yaki, KT, somebody, I forgot who recommended it. When I found her Instagram, I was like, oh, I gotta follow her and look at her stuff every day. So make sure y'all stay tapped into that Instagram. You mentioned, and I want to take a couple of questions from, we about to hit the hour mark in about 10 minutes. I'm gonna take a couple of questions from the family in the chat. Shout out to everybody in the chat. Get your questions ready. I'm gonna get to y'all in about 10 minutes, but I got a couple of more questions I want to ask. Absolutely amazing show. You mentioned the spinal cord and a little earlier. What is, have you ever done any study or research into the connection between trauma and Kundalini energy? That's something, a very important thing in the spiritual community. Like, what's the
Yeah.
connection?
Yeah, that is a great question.
Thank
And I think that oh, it brings up so many different things, right? This
you. Mm,
flow of cerebral spinal fluid goes right up to that pineal gland, and that kundalini activation
mm,
via that rising energy through the spinal cord up into the brain, and that awakening, that consciousness. And then the sort of inverse of that, or opposite of that, being too much for people, and
mm,
even that being a trigger, a traumatic trigger, right? And I think it goes back to this idea of building that resilience and that coherence in the body, so
mm,
that we can sort of have a safe place within us, have an anchor within us to explore greater activations. I think that is something that's really important to remember when we're exploring some of these things, is that having that safe space, that anchor within us, can be really important when we're trying to do different explorations into ascension. But we see that the cerebral spinal fluid and the canal that holds it It is, we know the chemicals in there, right?
Mhm.
And that's something that we know. But there's also mechanoreceptors in there, so that the flow of cerebral spinal fluid has biological action. We also know, we've been talking a lot about light, there are light receptors
Mm.
in the cerebral spinal
Mhm.
canal as well. And so you've got all these things that we were talking about today present there. So it seems to, I mean, even collagen, there's extracellular matrix proteins in the cerebral spinal fluid. So everything we've been talking about today exists in that system. And I think what we've been saying today about coherence and the resilience that it builds in our own internal biology is something that's really important, and we come back to when we're talking about Kundalini activation.
Indeed. Catherine, for those of us who want to live a healthy life, we know what we're up against when we go, let's just say, to the supermarket, or the food that's out there, fast food. If you're ordering from Postmates or Uber Eats, the food that, it's not the best of food, especially in this country. I think you could get French fries from McDonald's in this country and in another country, and the ingredients, and over here is like there's like 50 more ingredients or something like that.
Yeah.
But eating to somebody like myself, yourself, those watching, it could be a traumatic experience for us in the sense that we're constantly worried about what we're eating. We're
Yeah.
always looking. We're always looking at the, okay, well, let me look at the ingredients. Okay. Oh shit, there's an ingredient I can't recognize that name. And it can become very traumatic.
Yeah.
Does this, even though we're eating healthier foods, Karen, than the average person who may eat, just may get whatever, does the fact that we're stressing over what we're constantly buying, is that doing us more harm than we know, even though we're eating healthier foods?
I think you bring up a great point here. And yeah, we want to eat healthy foods. We want to eat foods that are low in contaminants and fresh and organic and
Yeah.
not filled with all that junk. But that worry isn't worth it. And so there has to be this balance between the two. There has to be an effort to treat our body like a temple and put things into it that it deserves.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things that it deserves is a sense of safety and a sense of peace. And so if we're constantly worrying about the ingredients and worrying about, oh, I mean, the list goes on, right? We've got polluted air, we've got polluted water, we've got polluted food. And if that's going to be at the forefront of our thoughts, that's going to act as a major stressor of the body. And the body can't heal when it's constantly in a state of stress. So you bring up a good point about how we want good food, but we don't want to stress about it, because that in and of itself is a massive danger signal in the body.
You mentioned stress, Catherine. How does the fascia respond differently to, let's say, a major stressor and trauma? Is it a difference between stress and somebody who has trauma? What's the difference internally?
I think that, we could make a really strong argument for there not being a big difference if the stress is chronic, if it is prolonged stress.
Mhm.
And we see, there's just a research study out showing that people who have anxiety and depression, they have more fascial adhesions, they have more tightness, more stiffness. They did a different research study showing that when a body worker or a professional works on that tightness, that adhered, stuck fascia, and performs something like a myofascial release, releasing that tension in the fascia, they have a decrease in that sense of anxiety or depression or mental health. They have an improvement in their mental health. This direct correlation between the flow of the fascia and the health of our mental, emotional health overall. And so it's really an incredible association there. It's an incredibly intimate relationship we have with the fascia and our mental health. And I think that when we're talking about all the things we talked about, how trauma deranges the immune system and the inflammatory system and the microbiome, we can say the same thing for prolonged chronic stress. Of course, we're supposed to be stressed. Actually, a little bit of stress is really good for us, but
Mm.
it's that constant stress that acts as a danger signal, and it degrades our overall health.
What do you think, Karen, in terms of mental health? What do you think? And I don't know if there's a either or, but what do you think would be more beneficial for one's mental health? Therapy is very popular in our culture right now. Everybody's talking about go to a therapist, go to a therapist, go to a therapist.
Yeah.
Would you recommend if you had somebody who attended your workshop and took your courses and talked to you, consultation, would you recommend a therapist or would you recommend them going to the sauna to get a massage or a hot body or whatever to release some of that tension? What do you think might be better for somebody, therapist or the sauna?
Yeah, yeah, that's an important question because there's so many things that we can do to address trauma that are free. Just getting up and getting exposure to sunrise, that red and infrared light that we see at sunrise is
Yeah,
so soothing for our
yeah.
new nervous system. Lowering the lights at night, getting natural light throughout the day, syncing with the rhythm of the sun, that's so helpful
Mm,
to our ability to heal from trauma. Going outside, earthing, putting our bare feet on the ground,
mhm,
that can be really powerful. Um, Addressing our mitochondrial health with a
mm.
sauna, like you just mentioned, with infrared energy. There's so many different ways to help heal and unravel trauma. And talk therapy is just one of them. So I think, what I really like to do is let people know all the options so they can choose what works for them. Because really, there are a lot of options out there on how we can address mental emotional health.
Mhm, mhm. Something that yourself and many others talk about also that's good for your mental health is, let's just say, the negative ions when we're around water or the ocean.
Yeah.
What are some other environments we can be in to get negative ions besides the ocean for those who maybe don't have access to oceans like that?
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't realize that's great. Being by ocean spray, being by a waterfall, rainfall, it's the shearing of the water that causes the water droplets to break apart and create negative ions. But a lot of people don't realize that when you're in a natural setting, when you're by a tree, when you're by a field of grass, as the wind blows through those plants, it picks up negative ions that are on the tips of those leaves, that are on the tips of those blades of grass, and brings them into the wind. So, to a certain extent, anytime you're outside in a natural environment, you are exposed to negative ions.
Let me ask you this now. They say our brains can't distinguish, and I just wrote this down. You talking made me think about this. Can't distinguish reality from imagination. It's all the
Mhm.
same, reality and imagination.
Yeah.
And this is why we have to be so careful about what we think, because our brain will think that's what's happening in the external environment and will produce a holographic matrix for us to experience.
Mhm.
Would it be just as beneficial, because we talked about the negative ions from the ocean, would it be just as or maybe almost as beneficial if we just listen to ocean, the sound of the ocean water or the sound of rain, and our brain heard that? Would that register in our brain as, oh shit, he's by the ocean or she's by the ocean, or oh, the rain, oh, water? Would that benefit us in terms of negative ions the same way or maybe just as much as if we were really in that environment?
Great question.
Thank
We see that listening to those sounds or even seeing them on
you.
TV, right? We're not there, but we're seeing that with our eyes. That has a profound effect on
Yes.
our biology in so many different ways, calming the nervous system, decreasing inflammation. They've shown that in hospitals, patients that had a window or patients that were watching natural settings of nature on a TV, they healed faster.
Hmm.
Um, they were allowed out of the hospital earlier, right? The emission rates were lower. And so it's incredible to think that, like you said, we are just responding to our environment. And so the more we can input that, whether that's sound, whether that's sight, whether that's actually being out in nature, all
Mm.
of that's going to have a beneficial impact on our biology.
Okay. Family, we hit the hour mark. I mean, listen, what more can you ask for with this show? Me and Dr. Catherine Clinton has been going back and forth for an hour. Absolutely phenomenal interview. I want to thank you once again for coming on the show. I want to get to some Q&A, a brief Q&A, if you don't mind, from the people in the chat. Let's get to a couple of questions before we get out of here. But wow, wasn't that an amazing back and forth right there? That was amazing. Very, and then, um, the more inspired I am in the interview, the better my questions come out. And I'm in like this topic, family is so important. Family, when I say it's important, I mean it's important because we got to understand who we are. We are quantum beings. So this approach right here and where we're headed with this science is like this is it right here, family. So thanks for staying the course of the show. Let's get to let me put Catherine on the full screen and let's get to some questions. Let's get to a couple of super chat questions first. Um, if the cerebral spinal fluid is the byproduct of our mother's amniotic fluid, is this a link to generational curses slash trauma? Any recommendations to work through this? It is seemingly unavoidable since we all are born out of this fluid. Great question.
Yeah, that is a great question. And I think that it would absolutely be reasonable to think that. And at the same time, I think that we often focus on generational trauma and we don't focus on generational resilience.
Mm.
And they're both there. They're
Mhm.
both there. And I think everything we've been talking about today helps unravel some of that generational trauma. But also, we've been gifted generational resilience at the same time. Absolutely.
Mm. What would be an example of generational resilience? Like if you could give us an example, what would you describe it as?
I mean, just looking throughout humanity, the capacity to go through hard times and keep our sense of grace, keep our sense of humanity, to continue to love, to continue to protect those around us, even when there is traumatic events. And so we see sometimes in the hardest, most traumatic situations and environments, the biggest examples of what it means to love, what it means to be human, what it means to coexist in a community, creating safety in times that are unsafe. So I think it's really important when we're talking about generational trauma to know that that goes hand in hand with generational resilience as well. And they come as a package. And so we can do what we were talking, earthing and grounding and mitochondrial support and all of these different things, being out in nature, wonderful ways to help address chronic stress and trauma and generational trauma, heart coherence, all of these things. But it came with generational resilience too. So there's a core of resilience, even if there is that trauma. And so being aware of that, being aware of our strengths, being aware of our resilience, being aware of our capacity to heal, just in and of itself, is a medicine too.
Indeed, excellent, excellent answer. Let's get to another question. Let me see here. How does cell phone radiation affect the fascia and melanin in skin?
Oh, that is a great question. So there's a researcher out there, Martin Paul, I think,
Mm-hmm.
Prowl. um, I can send that to you. But he is doing research that has shown that it, cells have these calcium channels, and it seems to increase the influx of calcium. And what that does is it depolarizes the cell, or basically it takes away that negative electrical charge or decreases that negative electrical charge that's so important. Gerald Pollack, that we talked about before, has shown that that easy structured water, that fourth phase water, also decreases in exposure to a wireless router. So we have sort of emerging evidence, although many of the leading scientific bodies still don't recognize this as a problem. We have emerging evidence showing that this can be problematic for our fascia, for the water that lines both fascia, both melanin, and just the cells that contain melanin, or the cells within fascia, and their ability to have that negative electrical charge that's so important. So we're kind of talking about multiple different
Yeah.
things there impacting that.
Yeah.
And, people always ask, well, what do we do? We've got 5G towers here. I live in an apartment with tons of Wi-Fi. But I think something to remember here is that the exposure is much more dramatic the closer it is to you. So if you're holding a cell phone to your ear, that's going to be some of the highest exposure that you can have. If you're holding it away from you with an extended arm,
Mm.
your exposure goes down, like fourfold. And
Mm.
that's pretty dramatic just by extending your arm, putting that phone on speaker, extending it. You can turn the phone on airplane mode, make sure that it's not by your head. When you go to bed, you can unplug your wireless router. Even if you're living in an apartment building where there is overall exposure,
Mm.
making sure that exposure isn't right up against the body, because again, our bodies are resilient.
Mm.
Our bodies are meant to adapt and can adapt. And so if we're kind of mitigating some of those really close exposures to cell phone use, to Wi-Fi exposure, then we're overcoming one of the biggest obstacles that we have right there from a health perspective.
Yo, I'm gonna tell you, Catherine, I haven't held a cell phone to my ear in over a decade, and I'm proud.
Yeah.
Like over a decade. When I first heard about that, and in a sense, I could feel the heat coming off the phone. It's like, oh, like in over a decade, I haven't done that. So I'm proud to say that. I,
Yeah.
I wouldn't advise that for family. If you can avoid that, please do.
Yeah.
Please do. Let's get to a couple of more questions. This is going so great. All right, we talked about the childbirth earlier. Somebody wants to know what is really going on with the taking of the placenta.
Yeah. I think you're referring to when people take the placenta after birth, right? Um, that placenta is this interface between the mother and the child. And what we now know in research is, we've known this for years, right? That's the way that nutrition gets into the child, but also the child and the stem cells from the child are circulating throughout the mother. So there is some bidirectional communication and sharing there. And the placenta just has a ton of hormones. So a lot of people take their placenta after childbirth to help with the hormonal up and down, the roller coaster that happens postpartum, to help ease and smooth out that hormonal transition into early, um, you know, postpartum recovery and being able to be a present, more calm mother. And I think that's what that question is asking, is about, taking your own placenta after childbirth.
Had it on mute. All right, let's get to this next question. If a person is paralyzed from the chest down, can they still work with their chakras and create a cosmic orbit around the body?
Oh, that is a great question. And we could get into some really interesting stuff. There is research out there, and I'm totally forgetting the researcher's name, but he was working with phantom limb
Mhm.
pain. So the person doesn't have that limb anymore. And what he did was he took the limb that they did have and he put a mirror opposite it and had the person look. So they're looking where there is a missing limb, there is no limb, there's a mirror that is reflecting the limb that they do have. And what he did was he did work on the limb that was still there and had the person just watch in the mirror, and that helped cure
Mm,
that phantom limb pain, because the brain is really plastic. It doesn't actually need that limb to be there. It just needs to be represented in the brain. So I think that if we have a brain, we can utilize so many different ways to access our chakras. And I think that this question would be a yes, that if somebody is paralyzed, you don't need physical motion, you don't need neurological action in that body part to energetically activate it. I think that that would be absolutely plausible, because what we're talking about is an interface between our thoughts and the energy in our body.
okay, okay. Next question. In your opinion, what is the best way to heal trauma? The best.
Mm. Oh man, I can't. So I'll say a few things. I
Okay.
think that it is individual, and
Mhm.
that many of us gravitate towards certain things. Sound is a wonderful way to help address trauma. It helps increase vagal tone. It helps soothe the nervous system. It helps decrease inflammation. It helps increase serotonin that we were talking about, that feel good hormone, dopamine, that focus motivated hormone. It increases melatonin, that anti inflammatory hormone. Self generated sound can be really soothing. We've got light that we were talking about, syncing with that circadian rhythm, movement, mitochondrial health. To be honest with you, I think one of the most powerful things and tools we have for healing trauma is understanding that it's not an on off switch. So many people I see are like, okay, well, when does this get better? Like when am I healed? When is that on off switch going to switch? And I think what we have to understand is that as humans here right now in this plane, it comes with trauma, it comes with hardship. And by embracing that, acknowledging it, it doesn't have to be a hard fix where we're broken and now we're healed. We can carry that trauma with us and be healthy. And
Mm,
it's not a black and white on off switch. It is a way to walk in the world that is hard and often unsafe for many different people out there, and being able to acknowledge that and and hold it lovingly, and incorporate that into a full sense of being, can be really really powerful when a lot of people are looking for an on off switch, like
yeah.
I'm broken, I want to heal, I want this over, versus like, okay, let me see what's happening here, let me see my subconscious train of thought, let me look at my triggers, look at my traumas, and just be with them, just accept them as part of the whole person. I think that is a step that is often missed when addressing trauma.
Mm. You know, Catherine, I got a question for you before I get to. I'm gonna do two more questions, then we're gonna get out of here. But I got a questions for you.
Yeah.
Since we talked about the negative ions that we get
Mm,
from the ocean, or it could be a waterfall, and
mhm,
how therapeutic and helpful that is for our mental health. And
mhm.
I want to ask you, why, if that's the case, then why when it rains we associate that with sadness? If we're getting the negative ions from the rain, the water, and it's connecting with us. Sometimes I go to sleep listening to water on my phone or rain on my phone. So if it's that beneficial, why is rain associated with sadness?
I don't know. That's a great question. I don't think it should be. When I look at my youngest and it's
Mm,
rainy outside, she likes to be out there. She likes to
mm,
dance in the rain. Sometimes she'll just stand in that part of the gutter where the rain overflows.
yeah, yeah,
Um, so I think that maybe that's something that we were given, that it's time we put down,
yeah.
because it's extremely healing.
Very healing. I like to go outside and just smell, and I just take a smell of the air and the water, and it's just makes you feel so good. So it's like, wow, just always wanted that. But let's get to we're gonna do two questions.
Yeah.
two more before we get out of here. Want to thank once again, thank everybody for tuning in. Let's
Yeah.
see. Hmm, somebody, okay. I like this one. Precise wants to know, can she talk about the effects that copper can have on our fascia? Copper.
Oh, that is a great question. And we're talking about a semiconductive collagen matrix and copper being able to pull in and conduct that fascia, right? There's many different traditions out there or medical interventions where people are wearing copper bracelets,
Mm-hmm.
copper jewelry to actually affect the fascia and affect pain and inflammation. And I think, we could get into so many neat things with electro
Okay.
culture
Yeah.
in our farms, in our gardens, where copper is being used to pull in that electrical charge. And so, what we talked about fascia being electroconductive and part of that bioelectric network in the body, copper would be adding to that. I mean, that would be sort of the benefit of copper. Same that we see with those rods where you take like a bamboo or a wooden stick and you cover it with a copper wire and put it in the garden to pull more electrical charge into that garden, into the soil to help those plants grow. Same thing would apply with copper and a bracelet, bringing more of that charge into that semiconductive fascia.
Indeed. All right. All right. This is gonna be the last question. This is from Kelly. This is a super chat. Thank you for the super chat, Kelly. Kelly says, my 20-year-old cousin stimulated me when I was 5. I forgot, but I had held the feelings of fear, anxiety, etc. He revealed it, and now those feelings are gone. Should I continue
Mm.
to get more details for more freedom?
Wow, that is a good question.
Mhm.
That is a good question. And I think that kind of mirrors what we were just talking about just acknowledging
Yeah.
something, just acknowledging trauma and not having to fix it or do anything, just being able to acknowledge it. And I think that, I mean, this is a deeply personal question. So I think that we all have an intuition. We all have this gut feeling. And so I would definitely follow your first instinct, your gut instinct, how safe you feel in that interaction and that exploration into wondering more and finding out more. But it seems like that interaction that you had, just finding out more, just like that observer effect, that was able to incorporate what maybe was not known before, and your body had a hard time reconciling what the experience was and the conscious not knowing of it. And once that became known, it could be incorporated. So again, I think this is a very personal question, and I would love to see you relying on that instinct, that gut instinct. And that often comes to us when we're quiet, when we are
Mhm.
first waking up, first falling asleep, when we have a quiet moment in a bath or a shower, when
Mhm.
there's a little bit of silence in our world and we can tap into not should, not the right thing, but what feels right, what
Mhm.
our gut, what our heart, what our instinct and intuition is telling us. And so I'd love to see you listen to that, and just I wish you the best.
Indeed, indeed.
Yeah.
Great, great answer. Oh man, Catherine, amazing interview. I want to thank you once again for
Thank
coming on the
you.
show. Tell the people your contact info. I know you got these workshops. You got so much going on. Tell the people everything so they can follow you and get in tune with what you got going on.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just Dr. Catherine Clinton. That's the name of my website, drcatherineclinton.com. I've got lots of free resources there about water, a water guide, a fascia guide, all kinds of stuff. I've got a YouTube channel, Dr. Catherine Clinton. I'm Dr. Catherine Clinton on Instagram and
Mhm.
Facebook, and I just love sharing this information. So find me there, and this is all I talk about.
Did you already do your workshop on the quantum biology of trauma? Do you already did that?
I'm right in the middle of it. So it's this 3-week course, and you get 6 modules, 21 daily tips. And then at the end of June, we do 2 deep dive live Q&As. We talk about fascia, mitochondria, pain,
Mm.
neurobiology. We just dive into it and leave time for questions. So that is still happening. It's open until the 29th of June.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. Hey, like I said, Catherine has one of the best Instagrams out there. If you are interested in quantum healing and tapping into your quantum self, make sure you follow her on Instagram. And with that being said, I guess we're getting out of here, family. Thank you once again, Catherine. I
Thank
will talk
you.
to you. Got to get you back on here again. So I will talk to you sometime in the near future. But thanks for everything.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Have a good night. All right. Family, I won't be live tomorrow. I will be back on Thursday. I will be back on Thursday. I won't no Thursday. Oh, tomorrow, by the way. So tomorrow I'm gonna send the link, share the link on my channel. I'm gonna be on the brother Heru Dre's. He has a podcast. I'm gonna be on his channel tomorrow at 5 in the evening. So I'm gonna share the link on my channel for that. For those who want to see that. But so yeah, I'll be doing that for about an hour tomorrow. Actually, let me tell y'all. So my lady got me tickets to the Wu-Tang concert tomorrow. Wu-Tang Clan is in Atlanta. She got me a ticket to go to the concert to see Wu-Tang perform. One of the best rap groups of all time. So I'm gonna be tomorrow night. I'm gonna be at a Wu-Tang concert, singing and rapping "Protect Your Neck" and METHOD Man and Cream and the rest of the hits. So I'm gonna be doing that tomorrow night. But yeah, besides that, one absolutely magnificent show today. Absolutely magnificent show today. It was electrifying the whole hour and change. But with that being said, family, so I'll probably see y'all Thursday night. I don't know who I'm gonna have on yet. I got a few people in mind, but I will see you Thursday night, family. All right. Everybody have a good night. Enjoy. Thanks for tuning in tonight. Peace and blessings, y'all.